I'm Jack, working the night shift at this old-fashioned hotel on the outskirts of a small American town. The place is tucked away in a desolate area, and it's rare to have many guests on a normal day. Once night falls, the entire hotel is filled with an eerie silence that sends shivers down my spine. I'm seated in the cramped staff room, where the dim, yellow light bulb casts a feeble glow, creating long, spooky shadows in every corner. In front of me, my laptop screen is playing an old horror movie, but it seems like the only thing it's doing is adding to the creepy atmosphere rather than dispelling my boredom and sleepiness. On the wall, a row of security monitors displays different areas of the hotel. I glance at them from time to time, mainly to check if any guests show up at the front desk unexpectedly or to keep an eye on the overall security situation. The empty hallways on the monitors look extremely gloomy, and the lights in the stairwells are flickering, as if they're about to go out at any moment. Around 3 a.m., just as I'm about to get up to grab a cup of coffee, I catch a glimpse of something strange on one of the monitors. It's the feed from the hotel basement. Hardly anyone ever ventures down there because it's damp, dark, and filled with a bunch of old, discarded junk. But right now, the lights in the basement are on, and a blurry figure is moving around. I lean in closer to the screen, trying to make out who it is. The figure is hunched over, looking like an old man, slowly pacing back and forth. With each step, there seems to be a dragging sound, and even though there's no audio on the monitor, I can almost hear the hair, raising noise in my mind. I'm puzzled. Why would someone be in the basement at this late hour? And I'm pretty sure I didn't check in any guests who said they were going down there. I keep my eyes fixed on the screen, eager to see what this person is up to. Suddenly, as if sensing my gaze, the old man jerks his head up and stares straight into the camera. His face looks deathly pale under the dim light, with sunken eyes that are completely devoid of emotion, but there's an indescribable eeriness in them. I'm startled by his sudden move, and a chill runs down my spine. Just then, the old man's lips curl up slightly, forming a creepy smile that doesn't reach his eyes at all. Instead, it sends a shiver down my back. Then, he slowly raises his hand and waves it towards the camera, as if he's greeting me, or maybe taunting me. I'm so horrified that my eyes widen in fear, and my hands start shaking involuntarily. I try to look away from this terrifying scene, but my eyes seem to be glued to the screen. The old man's figure continues to move slowly in the basement, sometimes disappearing into the blind spots of the camera, and then reappearing. Each time he shows up, his expressions and actions become even weirder, and his body is contorted as if he's being controlled by some invisible force. Suddenly, the lights in the basement flicker a few times, and then go out with a loud pop, plunging the whole area into complete darkness. I let out a sigh of relief, thinking that this nightmare is finally over. But a moment later, the lights come back on, and the old man is nowhere to be seen. I nervously scan the screens, trying to figure out where he went. At that moment, I hear a faint sound of footsteps coming from outside the staff room. The footsteps are getting closer and closer, as if they're heading straight towards me. My heart starts pounding rapidly, and my breathing becomes heavy. I stare intently at the door, my palms sweating profusely. The footsteps are almost at the door, and my heart is in my throat. Suddenly, the doorknob turns with a creak, and the door slowly opens a crack. I'm so scared that I hold my breath. Then, a pale hand reaches in through the crack, with long, slender fingers and long, black-colored nails that look like withered claws. Immediately after, a figure slowly squeezes in through the crack. It's the old man from the basement. His body is twisted in an unnatural way. His head is tilted to one side, at a really strange angle, and that spine, chilling smile is still on his face. He walks towards me step by step, with a giggle sound coming from his mouth with each step. I'm so terrified that I collapse into my chair. I want to run, but my legs are so weak that I can't even move. The old man gets closer and closer, and I can even smell a putrid stench coming from him. He stands right in front of me, lowers his head, and stares at me intently with his sunken eyes, muttering, "Non, stop, you can't escape." Just when I think I'm going to die, the old man suddenly stops, then slowly turns around and walks towards the door. After his figure disappears from sight, I finally snap out of it and quickly get up, determined to escape this hellish place. I rush to the front desk, trying to call the police, but the phone won't work no matter how many times I try. At this moment, I hear a strange sound coming from the hotel corridor, like someone is crying or moaning softly. I look around in horror, and everything around me seems so strange and terrifying. The lights in the corridor are flickering, and the shadows on the walls are constantly moving, as if there are countless pairs of eyes watching me in the dark. I muster up the courage and run towards the hotel exit. But when I reach the door, I find that it won't open, as if it's been locked by some unknown force. I lean against the door in despair, and tears start streaming down my face. Just then, I hear the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. I know that the old man is back again.
I'm Amy, an adventure enthusiast with a passion for exploring abandoned buildings. Each derelict place seems to whisper untold stories, and I'm eager to listen. This time, I heard about an abandoned hospital on the outskirts of a small town. It was said that many strange medical accidents had occurred there, and since then, it had been deserted and left untouched. Those rumors were like an invisible hand pulling at my curiosity, making me eager to uncover its mysterious secrets. Night fell like a huge black silk cloth covering the whole world. I carried a backpack filled with equipment, tightly holding a flashlight and a camera in my hands. With a mix of nervousness and excitement, I cautiously approached the eerie hospital. The entrance door was half open, creaking in the gentle breeze. The sound was like an old, dying man whispering about the vicissitudes of his life. I took a deep breath and slowly pushed the door open. A stale and rotten smell rushed towards me, instantly filling my nostrils and making me wrinkle my nose. The hall was dim. Large pieces of paint had peeled off the walls, revealing pitted and mottled surfaces like twisted faces looming in the dark. I inched forward along the dim corridor. The light from the flashlight swayed unsteadily on the walls, casting strange, shaped, menacing shadows that seemed ready to pounce on me at any moment. It was so quiet around that only the sound of my footsteps and heavy breathing echoed in the empty corridor. Suddenly, a faint crying sound reached my ears. The sound was ethereal, barely there, as if it had traveled through layers of darkness from a distant place straight into my heart. I stopped abruptly, my heart pounding uncontrollably. I stared wide-eyed and nervously scanned the surroundings, but there was nothing but darkness. Despite the fear that filled my heart, my strong curiosity still drove me forward. Soon, I came to a ward. The ward was in a mess. The beds were in disarray, as if there had been a fierce struggle. The bedsheets were covered with black stains, giving off a disgusting smell. I slowly approached one of the beds and noticed something glinting on it. With a trembling hand, I shone the flashlight on it. It was an old stethoscope. Its metal part glistened with a cold light, as if telling stories of pain and despair. Just as I was about to turn and leave the ward, clear footsteps came from behind me. The footsteps were unhurried, but each one landed heavily on my heart, as if someone was closely following me. I turned my head in horror, but there was only endless darkness in front of my eyes. Fear engulfed me like a tide. Without thinking, I quickened my pace, almost running to escape this terrifying place. However, fate seemed to be playing tricks on me. When I reached the end of the corridor, a closed door blocked my way mercilessly. I was extremely anxious. I pushed the door hard, but it was locked tightly. At this moment, the footsteps behind me were getting closer and clearer. I could even feel the cold breath of that thing on the back of my neck. I leaned against the door in despair, my heart pounding so hard that it seemed about to burst out of my chest, and my breathing became rapid and heavy. Just when I was on the verge of collapse, the closed door swayed slightly, and then, with a creak, it slowly opened. A figure in a white hospital gown appeared in front of me. The figure stood out starkly in the darkness. I stared in horror, my eyes wide open, trying to scream, but it was as if an invisible hand was tightly squeezing my throat, and no sound came out. When I saw its face clearly, a chill ran down my spine from the soles of my feet. There were no facial features on its face, just a mass of blurred flesh and blood as if they had been brutally torn off. Blood was still dripping down continuously. It let out a giggle sound from its mouth, the shrill laughter piercing my brain like countless steel needles. My legs gave way, and I collapsed to the ground. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were filled with lead and couldn't move at all. The figure approached me step by step, and with each step my fear grew. I closed my eyes in despair, tears streaming down uncontrollably. I thought to myself, was I going to die here today? Just then, a sharp alarm suddenly rang out. The sound cut through the dark silence like a life-saving ray of light. The terrifying figure disappeared without a trace the moment the alarm sounded, as if it had never been there. I slowly opened my eyes and found myself lying in the hospital hall, surrounded by a group of police officers and medical staff. It turned out that when I was exploring the hospital, I accidentally triggered the alarm system I carried with me. The police rushed to rescue me after receiving the alarm. Although I finally escaped this nightmare, the terrifying experience in that abandoned hospital was like a deep scar, forever engraved in my mind and becoming an unforgettable shadow in my heart. Ever since then, whenever I think of that night, my body trembles involuntarily, as if I were back in that place full of fear and despair.